Welcome back.
Welcome back, Steve.
Well done, Anthony, on that last one.
Oh,
Some good presentation stuff.
Thank you, sir. Is that to overcome the interruption you had at the end there?
Well, I never live it down.
Guys, if you want to ring or text Steve, now's a good time.
No tweets, they all beep on me.
Entertains me no end, it's great. All right, so in this next section, I'm going to cover a couple of things for us, and then I'm going to hand back over to Steve to take us home there towards the end. So this next topic is the first half of managing test execution. What we're going to cover here, if we have a look there, I'm going to go through running our tests. Now, both Steve and I have both demonstrated a bit of, that running. So really, I'm just going to call out a few little differences there, a few little nuances that you'll need to be aware of for the exam, and of course to use the tool itself. And then we're going to see one of my favourite new things that they introduced in 2012. Well, maybe new is not the right word, but exploratory testing got a lot of love in the 2012 release. So hopefully you'll find that as exciting as I do. So I'll cover off those first two topics, and then I'm going to hand over to Steve. And Steve's going to talk about managing bugs, using the Lab Centre, analyse recommended tests, perform analysis, and managing work items.
See, I got the shaft. I think that was predominantly because he just changed the slides here just a couple minutes ago to add those extra ones for me. For the phone thing, I don't know.
It's all right. By the time I finish talking, there'll be another 5 underneath that. Okay, so let's get back to the first one here, running tests. So what the study guide says here is that you want to be able to run tests with options. Now that's something I haven't demonstrated. Have you demonstrated running with options yet?
Not yet.
Yeah, so no. I think that's a new one for us. Creating fast forward for manual test recordings. Well, both Steve and I have both demonstrated that one now. So I think we're pretty okay on that one. Selecting fast forward playback options, so all steps or multiple steps. I think we've covered that already. Yeah. And that was where I selected, for example, 1 through 16 and said play. And then also I chose, I think, the very final step, which was just to close the browser.
And you can always walk up to the top, and on the down arrow, there's a play all option and click. That's about the only thing you can do. Yeah. At that point, if you do push play all, if you're doing any validation, you got to watch quick, because those things can fly.
We'll have a look at setting test run states and then validating our expected results. So I guess what I'm looking at here is really just a bit more of a look around the test runner, is how I'm going to choose to summarise that. So not really the biggest section there. I think most of that will come back when we look at exploratory testing after this. So I'm going to start with the problem domain. When a tester finds a bug, it's very common practice for the tester to repeat the exact same steps, often 2 or 3 times, to verify the bug and prove it's reproducible. It's funny, as I ask this question to groups of developers or testers, the answers I get are interesting. Historically, or statistically is a better way of saying it, I'll ask a group of developers, you're walking through, you think you found a bug, what do you do next? And their answer is, raise a bug. You ask the same question to a group of QA professionals. So you're walking through some steps, you think you found a bug, what do you do next? And what's their answer, Steve?
Make sure you can reproduce it.
Yeah, repro it. Yeah. Absolutely. And then the question is, if you can't repro it, is it even a bug?
Yeah.
Because if the tester that finds it can't reproduce it, if they raise the bug with the steps and give it to the developer, what's the developer going to do?
They throw it right back as it cannot repro.
Can't repro, throw it back. So arguably you're almost wasting your time. Maybe the recommendation there is if you can't repro it, maybe grab that test case and increase the frequency. If your instinct is telling you that there's just something not right about that part of the application, but I can't repro it, let's just keep an eye on it. Let's test it more frequently to see if we can find what's going on here. But raising a bug when you as a QA person can't repro it yourself, I don't know that that's particularly a good strategy. Right. Well, not going to get the result you were hoping for. You're probably just going to frustrate your developers. Okay. So looking back at the slide there, in terms of that problem domain, having to go and reproduce things consumes significant amounts of a tester's time and often involves repeating large numbers of steps. So we've talked about test case fast forward already. I don't know that we need to go back over that. Steve and I have both demonstrated it. But the test case fast forward certainly can be an absolute godsend when you think about some of these tests could be 60, 70 steps, and it's failing on step 56. So test case fast forward potentially allows us to highlight steps 1 through 50 and say, you know what, you go and do that for me. And then I'll take over when it gets a little bit interesting. So I think, fast forward is something that manual testers really, really love. So in this demonstration, I'm going to go through and have a look at a couple of things, probably just the exceptions of what we haven't seen so far. So under the test section here, how about I go and find, we've been working with 49, we may as well stick with it. I'm going to go in there, and this time we're going to see run and run with options. When I choose run with options, the test settings that you see here, and you'll remember that earlier on today, or one of the earlier sessions, Steve went through and he created some of these test settings. Now, there was one there already called lightweight diagnostics, but Steve created another one which was, everything in the kitchen sink or something.
That was it.
So what we're going to do is, we both discussed that we would probably accept lightweight diagnostics as the default.
Yep.
So if we're just going through doing our normal testing over and over, lightweight's probably the one we want. It's a good balance between the amount of data we get and the storage overhead and cost of that. Now, if we were to go through and we believe that we've found a bug, I might choose to rerun that test case again, but this time I'm going to step up into full diagnostics, or certainly something that gives us a lot more information. Now when I choose to go and run that test case, well, it's going to look virtually the exact same. Okay, you can't really see anything here, but if I was to go and raise a bug now, we're going to get a lot more information. Now I think you cover raising bugs in your section, Steve?
I do.
You do?
I do.
So I might work my way down there. I'll choose to fast forward those steps. Ooh, my machine must have had a little rest there. Okay, now I won't demonstrate it right now, but if I was to go in there and raise a bug, we're going to find a lot more information is going to be attached to that. So I'm sure when Steve shows you raising bugs in the next section, you're going to see, go in and have a look at some of those attachments that get added there and find that the information is just so much richer. While we're doing this test execution, I can also go in and I can add some comments. So I can put any little details in here. And this is just something about this particular test run. Things are running a little slowly. Might want to keep an eye on that. It shouldn't be something there to do with bugs. I mean, we raise those bugs specifically and directly, but what I'm doing here instead is simply creating a little comment or a note that'll be recorded and kept with this particular test run. Okay, so we'll go ahead and include that. Now it does talk about adding comments and snapshots. Let's just work our way around the test runner for a moment, just to call out anything of interest. If you look up here, we can see the iteration that we're working on. Now, remember, an iteration is a row of sample data or test data. There could be 10, 20 rows of data in here. If we're finding that row 17 has a hyphenated surname and that's where the bug occurs, you haven't got to run through 16 iterations first. You can go directly there. You'll see that depending on the depending on the data collectors we're using, you'll get a range of attachments added, but I can also arbitrarily go and attach anything I want. So for example, if the application I'm working with takes an XML file as an input, does some processing and produces a report, if I get a bug, I could simply say add attachment. I could go and find the XML file that I'm parsing and add that into this particular test run. So, it's not just limited to the attachments that we're collecting through the data collectors. They can be any attachment you want. Working our way across, you'll see here that I can also go up and I can indicate a particular state of this test run. So I can make it a pass, I can explicitly make it a fail, I can pause what we're doing, or maybe I'm going to say this is blocked. There is something, not a bug, but there is something preventing me from continuing. Maybe the sample data hasn't been loaded yet, maybe the digital certificate's not installed on the server, so I can't go and do testing of SSL. Or maybe it's not applicable any longer, so this particular test case may be redundant. Working our way down. Now this was the configuration. I spoke about configurations earlier. Now there is nothing here that checks or tests to make sure that we are in fact doing that. That is a label, an indicator to the tester of, this is what we should be using. Now, I expanded that earlier. It shows me the current build that's identified as being in use for my own interests, and it allows me to add those comments there. If I work my way down, you'll see down the bottom here that my action recording's occurring. Okay, not a lot of interest down there for now. Working my way back up. Now, Steve's going to show you most of those things, bugs and screenshots. I guess this one's probably falls into my domain maybe a little bit. So if you have a look here, we can go and create environment snapshots. We can connect to environments. Okay, so that's sort of hidden a little bit out of the way there. Okay, and I just misclicked that. So I can choose to go in here, and if I was using a lab managed environment, if there was 1, 2, 10, 15 machines there, in addition to everything else that gets collected and made available to the developer to diagnose the bug, we can also add an environment link. So what that will do is take a snapshot across all machines in that environment. We can then add that to the bug that gets raised, so that, in terms of trying to repro a bug, well, I get the bug, I double click a link, that can go to the environment, reapply the snapshot across however many machines are in that environment, and take me back to the exact state when that bug was actually raised by the tester. That's pretty amazing.
That's just downright impressive.
Yeah.
I mean, that's insanely impressive.
Yeah. And it'd be great to demonstrate, but we just haven't got those lab environments set up there. So
again, we do need to focus on what's on the exam.
Yeah.
Not a lot of lab management on this particular exam. More on the admin exams where we see more of that lab management.
True.
So tomorrow might get to cover some of those things.
Okay.
Still probably not the environmental snapshots.
No. Not with what else was got to come in that particular prep.
Yep.
Okay, continuing my way across on the demo machine then. So you've seen that I can add comments up here. Now that was for the entire test run I was doing. I can add comments to a particular step down here, although that's more commonly done prior to raising a defect or bug or failing a step. And I can also go in here and add an attachment to a step result, as opposed to adding an attachment to the particular test run itself. So lots and lots of options there, and I think I've covered most things there in terms of the test running. I've covered all the states, the fast forward. I'm kind of thinking if there's anything in there that I've missed, and I can't think of any. So
I think you've nailed it.
So let's get back out of there for now.
Except for one interesting thing. Did you know you can now, in 2012, pause your test cases while you're running them?
Mm-hmm.
If you pause them, you can pause them and then just jump back, save and close, and it just pops you right back into this test manager, and you can resume them at a later time.
Isn't that fantastic?
I think so.
Yeah. Well pointed out.
That was the one thing that I just didn't notice. It's just the behavior. Once you pause it, you just close it and you're in.
And again, just while it's paused, just be careful not to change the application's state.
Right.
Yeah. Pausing is good for a quick urgent email or something, perhaps.
Yes. Not so much for powering down the machine and going home for the night, right?
All right, let's continue then. So back to a couple of slides there. So this next section talks about exploratory testing. So what the study guide says: perform ad hoc exploratory testing, exploring by work item, generating a test case from test, generating bugs from exploratory tests, and adding screenshots, video and audio recordings. So exploratory testing, I think, it's absolutely fantastic. For a long time, and I still hear it referred to as ad hoc testing, but I think that as a term isn't really as commonplace. You still hear it, but ad hoc, I think, tends to potentially devalue it. exploratory testing, I think, was it Sen Kamer? Kaner? I'm saying his name incorrectly. Was probably one of the first references, the first books that really talked about exploratory testing and the critical importance of that in any good test plan.
I couldn't agree more. I think that I forget who I was listening to, but some tester talking about how automated testing can run ruts in your in your code. Basically, you automate all these tests. No one ever comes back to validate that you've done the right thing in that particular automated test. So if a developer violates anything off the automated test, boom, it's caught. But then there's this broad range of things that aren't caught, and you need to be able to catch those. And exploratory testing really uses the domain knowledge of the tester to find those types of bugs. I think it's absolutely critical that we use exploratory testing more and more and more. I'll give a couple reasons. I've worked with companies that have automated a huge chunk of their testing, including UI automation. And a tester will get the latest build, they'll try to figure out how to test it, and they'll walk through this really convoluted, crazy UI once.
Yeah.
And now it's automated. Do they ever see the convoluted UI ever again? Nope. It's automated, so they don't see how absolutely atrocious that UI is. And so because of that, they've lost this ability to come back and say, you know, technically this works, but it just stinks.
Yeah.
So.
No, that's great. So a couple other examples of them. I mean, if we want to just get fast feedback, you know, if you want to find any, you know, large bugs, if you just want to quickly get through there, exploratory testing is fantastic for just diving through an app and giving them quick feedback before we then start creating the manual test cases and building it out. I think it's also really, really good that we can do that, you know, we can test unusual paths through an application. As developers, traditionally we don't make great testers. You know, it's the whole right brain, left brain perhaps is a way of looking at it. An example I normally give would be that if you know, let's talk about housework. I think I gave my son a hard time in the last presentation. Let's talk about my wife. Yeah. So if I was doing some vacuuming at home, okay, now there's the most entertaining thing that I actually do housework, and my wife would correct that straight away. But if I was to look at a room, I walk in there with a vacuum cleaner, basically without conscious thought, my brain will automatically, you know, divide the room up, and I will do that in the fastest, efficient way I can. I will cover every square inch once and get that done. Now, my wife will use the chaos principle. She'll walk in, you know, it's just, there's no pattern, no rhyme, no reason. Now, all due respect to her, it'll be a thorough job because everything's been covered 3 or 4 times. But I guess my point is that, you know, different people do things in a different way. So as a developer, we tend to, you know, developers tend to have a very structured approach. You know, we've got a form there, we'll just go top left down to bottom right, we'll fill things in, we'll go next, and just we'll have this logical flow. That's not, in many cases, anything like your users. Users can be very creative, and they will try things that, you know, developers will never have thought of. So exploratory testing is a really good thing in that, you know, you can pretend for a minute that you're left brain or right brain. Try the opposite. Just go on a bit of a click fest. Oh, I shouldn't use that term. That could be misinterpreted to, again, devalue the importance. I shouldn't say click fest, although that I have seen that as a perception. So exploratory testing, I guess one of the biggest challenges of it is being able to repro things. If you're following a dedicated sequence of steps and something goes wrong, well, just follow the steps again. But if we're doing exploratory testing, more free form through the application, and a defect occurs, well, how do we give good repro steps to the developer? So basically pen and notepad in hand, mouse and keyboard in the other, and everything I do, I quickly jot down everything so that I've got a chance of having some repro steps to hand over. So that can make exploratory testing very, very time consuming for us. Okay, so that's a bit of the problem domain there. So back to the slides for a moment. Exploratory testing in 2012 has been greatly improved over the 2010 version. When you want to commence an exploratory testing session, you've got a choice. We can choose to just do exploratory testing without, testing a particular requirement. And I'll demonstrate that to you shortly. Or we can go down here and these are our requirements. And I can say, well, this first one here, as a customer, I should be able to remove items from my cart. I want to do exploratory testing around that particular requirement.
There's one other cool way to get there, and that's actually in the test window itself, in the contents of the test plan. You can right-click any of the requirements-based ones and simply say Explore.
Explore, it's great.
I love that. They made it simple to do that exploratory testing. They kind of opened it up and let us be able to figure it out easily.
In 2010, just to give you an example, I've spoken about it a couple of times, you had to create a manual test case with no steps in it, or one step saying, manually explore this thing. And you needed that there in order to start the data collectors and so on.
Yep.
So one of the big improvements here is you don't need to create those placeholders anymore.
Well, and what you had to do too, if you explored something and wanted to create a test case, you had to walk through the whole thing on that stupid one-liner and then create a bug and then go create a test case from the bug. It was,
It wasn't the experience we'd like.
Not the experience we'd like to have.
Okay, well, have I got another slide? No, let's get straight into a demonstration here. All right, so I'm going to go in here and under my test tab at the top, you'll see I've got the ability to do exploratory testing. As Steve's pointed out, we can do this from a couple of other places as well, but I'll use this one for now. I can go up here and say that I just want to go and do some exploratory testing without wanting it to be related to a particular requirement, or I can go and choose a requirement and indicate that I'm going to be exploring this one. Now, the benefit of that is any test or bug that I create from this experience will automatically be linked back to that requirement. That's largely the only difference between them, is exploring a particular work item here will automatically place the links back in there for traceability. So, Steve, which one would you prefer? Would you like just free-form exploratory, or should we do a requirement-based?
Do a requirement-based one, because then we can show that crazy linkage.
Lovely choice.
Especially if you find a bug.
All right. So
and a test case.
I think I'm going to find them,
Woohoo!
Number 7 there. Let's go ahead and explore that. Now, I've got a choice here. Explore work item or explore work item with options. In fact, up here, explore. There we go. Explore or explore with options. Now, didn't we see something like that before? Run and run with options?
Yes,
it's a bit of a common theme. So the main opportunity there is if I choose the with options, it's just going to pop this dialog up. It's going to give me the opportunity to change any of these defaults. That's really all it is. If I'm happy with the defaults, then of course I can just go straight in there and say explore. I don't have to go in with options. That's the main difference. So I've got full diagnostics, and for exploratory testing on this occasion, my confidence level is a bit low with this functionality. I think we're going to need that full diagnostics. I click explore, and the test runner is going to start and dock to the left-hand side as it usually does. Now down here, it's recording the screen, and because I'm in a virtual machine and I don't have any voice option in there, any recording device, it's going to automatically disable voice recording. But I've got, if I was running on a physical machine, I've got the ability there to go and change those settings down the bottom here. Okay. I can also go and modify the annotation tool. At the moment, it's going to use MS Paint. I'm a big fan of, Snagit, or, you could use Paint.net or any of those other tools. Yep. So you can plug those things in there. And of course, here we go. That's where I don't have any audio devices. So I'll jump back out of there. Now I'm going to say start. And of course, with exploratory testing, there are no test steps. That's the whole point. I'm going to go in here and I'm just going to start exploring that functionality. I'm going to open up my application. I'm going to navigate to the URL. And I'm just going to start exploring. I'm going to go into model airplanes. I'm going to go into Fourth Coffee Flyer. And no, that'd be convention to click on Add to Cart. Well, let's do something a little different. Let's go down and click on rockets. I want to see some rockets. Click. Uh-oh.
You're still on Fourth Coffee Flyer.
That's not so good. You know what? I think we found a bug.
I think we did.
All right, so the rockets link doesn't work. So what I can do is I can take some notes over here. Looks pretty bad. That doesn't make a lot of sense, but I just like to play with my developers a little bit just to tease them a tad. So I can choose to go in here and add a screenshot. In fact, it would probably make just a wee bit more sense if I scroll down. Let's go and add a screenshot in here. That automatically captures it over here. I can double click on it to bring up that notation tool, which was MS Paint in this default. So I can go ahead and let's put a little arrow there. Let's mark it up. And we can go and put some text there. In fact, let's fill that little shape with it. Oh, crayon. Oh. Okay, sorry, off the topic. So let's go ahead and close that, save it. And look, there's my little annotation automatically saved. Now, this particular bug, well, it's potentially a bug, but I would also possibly believe that this could be a failing of QA. Potentially a failing of QA to have a dedicated test case to test this. So out of this experience, I want two things, Steve. Not only do I want the bug so that the developers can go and fix this link, I want something else. I want a test case. I want a test case that can verify when they have fixed it, but then that test case can become a regression test for the future to make sure it never comes back again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here and say that I want to create a bug, please. I'm going to go up the top here and I'm going to say the rockets link doesn't do anything. I might choose to go and assign that to someone. I will give it a priority and severity. But let's have a look at the value that we've got here. It's automatically gone and said it looks pretty bad. That was my text from up the top. It said that I've gone to that URL using a new browser. It's exactly what I did. I click the model airplane link and look, it's created a little snippet exactly around where I clicked. That's awesome.
That is awesome.
In terms of a repro, they should be able to repro this right down to the finer point.
Down to the pixel.
They go through here, they click on model airplane, which is exactly what I did, and then I went and clicked on rockets right in the middle. Then I observed that it didn't work. It's captured information, so I've got screen and video recording here, I've got my IntelliTrace log, the action recording system information. That was because I chose my full diagnostic suite. So I've got all of that information there, and of course I can also go up here and I can just put in extra text. I mean, it's only putting those placeholders in there, and I think they're pretty good. If I wanted to go and tweak them up a little bit on the blue background or whatever you need, you can do that. I can go up here and change the steps in case it isn't, in case I don't want all of the steps in this recording. Maybe I want to go back just X number of steps. Either way, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and raise that bug, but you'll remember that I wanted two things out of this. I wanted the bug and a test case, please. And of course, if we look in the bottom right-hand corner here, I can save that bug and create a test case. Let's do that. So the bug's now been shuffled off to the developers to hopefully get on top of it. And as a tester, I want to make sure that we've got a test to verify and validate when they get that fixed. So just to keep it simple, check the rockets link from the model airplanes page. So it's put the test steps in for me. Go to that URL using a new browser, click model airplanes, click view plane, click the rockets link. And now I'm going to go and put in an expected result. The rockets page is displayed. And as a good stateless test, I'm then happy to close the browser when I'm done. So again, it's done most of the work for me. It's put in virtually the steps that are perfect. I'll just go and put in a validation and expected result here. I'll close the browser to keep them good and stateless. And I think I'm done there. Save and close.
That by the way, that's money.
Oh,
right
for
there.
sure.
The ability to go out, explore, find a bug, file the bug and the test case to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Yep.
It's great. In addition, I'll get to show how to verify bugs in a minute. Without that test case linked to the bug, I'm lost.
Yeah. And of course, look what's happening over here. So it's created my bug, it's created my test case, but I'm still in my exploratory testing session. I'm able to keep going, and during this particular exploratory testing session, I could end up with half a dozen bugs. I could end up with 10 test cases out of there. And when I'm finally done, I've got the ability to say I want to go ahead and end that testing. Now you'll see here that it records that exploratory testing session, and I can always come back later to see exactly what was done. So during this session that started somewhere in the middle of last year, at 6 o'clock at night, well, that's what my VM's set to, the killer VM. You'll see that I went in there and we created during that session one bug. Here it is. During that session, we created this test case, and here's a couple of the notes that we took during that process. So going back and viewing the exploratory test results there, absolutely great. So let me close back out of there and dive back to the slides. So in terms of those very first two sections there, so practice executing your test cases, make sure you're familiar with test case fast forward, get to know the test runner UI and what its capabilities are. Understand exploratory testing and the value of it. So being able to go in there and know that you can create your exploratory testing, know that you can create it as a free-form exploratory testing, or you can link it to a requirement. Okay, and I didn't show that. I should have opened that bug. That's right. You can show that when you raise the bug.
I have a whole section on those things. I'll go ahead and cover that.
Well, that's even more reason for me to show it. So, anything you'd like to add to those exam best bets for the running and the exploratory testing, Steve?
No, I think that's kind of key. Make sure that you do run it a few times, get a feel for that exploratory testing and how it works, and some of those options like recording video, recording audio, and those sorts of things. I think are important.
Excellent. Well, let's take a 10-minute break, and when we come back, Steve's going to wrap us up with that final session.
Yep.
And take us home.
All right.
See you in 10.
See you in 10.